Myself, I'm Devi Prasad. This is DA1 for ISS video lecture. So my topic is three-step multi-factor authentication system for the modern security. So what is modern security we are using nowadays? Uh, Given every network system we use in our daily life leaves a plays an important role in security. We wanted to expand the protection by using a three-level security system. The third level security, the most important part of our secure computer system, secure user authentication, safety issues are increasing for all industries, including bank health centers, and industries. User verification is very common on mobile phones, devices, and desktop users due to development of mobile devices and increased interoperability and mobile applications and web services. The most cases it grant us many things, both the mobile devices and desktop is required. So my introduction is, as we discussed before, the distillation is more developed in nowadays. So with that, all the parameters of the sites of modern security is developed, and one key has to maintain this process security is authentication. It covers many different areas of hyper connected world, including online payments, communication, access, right management, etc. The work sheds light on evaluation of authentication systems towards multi-factor authentication, and starting from single-factor authentication and through two-factor authentication. Particularly, the multi-factor authentication is expected to utilize for the human to everything impacts by enabling fast, user-friendly, or readable authentication and accessing a service. So the main objective of this is the higher level securities is user authentication. The user will be given an access to set the password that will. The project contains the text encryption as password and PIN or pattern support password or three-level OTP password respectively. So nowadays, for any password change or email updates, so we are aware the system is asking for the OTP. That is good security. This way will be less likely to the bot or anyone to crack the passwords whenever you break the first or second level, or it is impossible to post from a third. Therefore, during the development of technology, the use of new and as usual is the main purpose of the level 3 security plan is also different tutorial on using a OTP. That is a one-time password uh, that helps giving the system extremely secure. Thus, uses three levels of security. So the first level is text authentication. The second level is PIN or pattern. The third one is OTP authentication. So the multi-factor authentication in the sense, so if the user is using on one device and with the unknown person want to use his account, so where the first we can use it text authentication. So he need an email or mobile number. So then it generates a PIN or pattern. So that the PIN or pattern is forgotten. So we can likely go to the OTP authentication. Where the authentication takes the factors. Authentication takes a place when someone tries to log in into a computer resource such as a network or device or application with unknown person of the unknown person. So the resource requires the user to supply the identifier by which the user is unknown to the resource along with the evidence of the authenticity and the user's claim to that identity. Simple authentication requires only one such piece of evidence, that called a password. So when it means that if it is an I am the system owner, so I know that the password. So that it is a simple authentication. It requires only one such piece. So when it is an unknown person uses the system, so it requires the security is to be more. So for additional security, the resource may require more than a one factor. That means that multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication in cases where exceeding two pieces of evidence are to be supplied. So the main factors here is something that the user has, something that the user knows, something the user is, and somewhere the user is. Something the user has in the sense any physical object in the possession of the user, such as a security token, USB stick, and a bank or a key, etc. Something that the user has in the sense the ATM card with the user, so he knows the pin, so he can use the pin. So something the user knows. Certain knowledge only knows the user, knows the user, such as in password, pin, etc. And something the user is, so some physical characteristics of the user and biometrics such as a fingerprint, eyes, eras, voice, uh, typing speed pattern, and the key press intervals, etc. Something the user is. So whether somewhere the user is some connection to a specific computer network or using a GPS signal to identify the location. So these are all the security factors of the multi-factor authentication. So there's an example, one example here. The two-factor authentication is the withdrawing of the money from an ATM. So this was example. So one of the correct combination of a bank card, there's something called the user processness and the PIN, something the user knows allows the transaction to be carried out. The third-party authentication apps enables two-factor authentication in a different way, usually by showing a randomly generated and constantly refreshing code, which the user can use rather than sending the SMS or using another method. Example of third party authentication apps include Google Authenticator and Microsoft Authenticator. Some passwords managers such as LastPass offer the service as well. So the thing is, the slide says that whether third-party authenticator app enables two-factor authentication in a different way, usually by showing it a randomly generator and constantly refreshing the code, where approximately to 1 month, 1 to 2 months, the password is to be changed, to be forced to change the user by the user, which the user can use rather than by sending a SMS or using another method. Another method is OTP by mail. Like this. So today we know that the three steps of factors groups are available to connect an individual with an established credentials. Knowledge factor something the user knows, such as a password or simply a secret, like a public and private key. The ownership factor something the user has, such as cards, smartphones, or other tokens. Biometric factor in the sense something the user is the biometric data or behavior pattern. So when when you're going to malls or something, as we know that our mobile has a fingerprint, so that without entering the password, you can use the biometric app, you can open a code. Why the multi-factor authentication is important? Right? The main usability challenges emerging in the authentication process could be characterized from the three perspectives. So there is a task efficiency, task effectiveness, and user preference. Time to register and time to authenticate to the system, and the number of login attempts to authenticate to the system. The number login attempts to the system. So whether user preference is whether the user prefers a particular authentication scheme over another. In addition to the approaches discussed previously, and we have already started and specific efforts in our authentication procedures based on the variety of human factors. The factors have provided a study on how the user page affects task efficiency in the case of PIN and graphic access mechanisms. This could conclude the younger generation can be speed up within 50% of less time to pass an authentication to procedures. In both cases, interestingly, the authors have to show that the gender in the same case does not affect the results. The main benefit of the multi-factor authentication, it will enhance our organization security by requiring our users identify themselves by more than a username and password. That is the more benefit of any like suppose a VIT, suppose in VIT we have a student, so that to log into the meetup, that is good to have a username and password to get my login credentials. When important, the usernames and passwords are univariable to build forces attacks that can be stolen by third parties. So enforce. So when the third parties knows the password and you know that he knows the password, you can immediately by getting a OTP to your mobile number, you can change the password in the seconds. Enforcing the use of an MFA factor like that to be a thumbprint or physical hardware keys means increased confidence that our organization will be safe from the cyber criminals. So we have that maybe Wi-Fi for the VID Wi-Fi. To not to connect more devices, we have MAC address up there so that we have a user ID to the password. By using that, they can keep the Wi-Fi safer within particular students. It's not the scholars. We also use the Wi-Fi which is being given to the hospitals. So as we discussed before, the username and password is entered first. So then the pin from the mobile number entered, so that the second party will check that how the pin is correct or the phone number is correct, whether the password is correct, whether the passwords are matching, and at the last we have to verify the fingerprint. The main three type of multi-factor authentication methods that we know things you know knowledge such as the password or PIN. That is the first one. Things you have such as a badge or a smartphone. Things your uh, inherent such as a biometric like fingerprints or voice recognition. So in some laptops we have that say hello and then the code secret code for any doors or some system. Then automatically by using that it opens it unlocks the system or unlocks the door. So the properties of an authentication device plays a major role in this process. So the authors of an investigation investigated the user of a textual passwords on mobile devices. It was proven using a smartphone or other keyboardless in equipment for the creating passwords suffers from improved usability or as compared to the conventional personal computers. Another work confirmed that the same theory from a task efficiency perspective. So this is adaptive adaptive authentication for risk-based authentication methods. Uh, with the the third person enters our devices, takes our devices for this work. Another subset of multi-factor authentication is adaptive authentication, also referred to be to as risk-based authentication. Adaptive authentication analyzes additional factors by considering context and behavior when the authenticating and often uses these values to find a level of risk associated with the login attempt. For example, from where the user from where is the user when trying to access the information, when you are trying to access company's information during the normal hours or during off hours. So it is in the same or one use this three. So in the connection where private network or a public network with a phone or a laptop is used. The risk-based authentication is a non-static authentication that handles the profile of IP address and with the browser, which browser is using, and the physical location, so and so on. The consumer restricting the access to the system to determine the risk profile associated with that action. So the authentication, risk-based authentication is a non-static authentication. So of the agent requesting access to the system to determine uh, the risk profile associated with the transaction. So the next one is so this is the risk-based authentication example. So the user profile with where the low risk doesn't it just say the what in that so and so person is entered your device or entered your account that we have when we see the Google account. So it enters into the it just sends our mail automatically that is 40%. So wait, so and so person, so and so location, your device is, your account is logged in. Uh, so that so that it detects the IP address of the phone and it detects the name of the phone. Suppose if I have logged in on my iPhone X, so it says that in an iPhone X, so your account was logged in at that particular time in the particular location. So that is a lower list. So medium list in the sense all the passwords is forgotten by you, and that could be different with also by sending into the OTP into the number which the phone has. So that is medium risk. So high risk is the thing. So you all forgotten and you all entered the wrong password by trying many attempts, so that the access is blocked and the account is blocked. So the verification is blocked. You cannot access, and it wants to the users, or else if you forgot the things that it is required for the login. So nothing there, it is account blocked. The account is blocked. So main operation challenges of multi-factor authentication is usability, integration, robustness, and privacy security with the probabilistic behavior. So these are all the main characteristics of multi-factor authentication to keep prevent. Today, one of the most online authentication services with knowledge base depend on the username and password combination nowadays. So the more complex system required to the users to interact with the additional tokens, one-time passwords, code generates, and code. Completing traditional authentication strategies, multi-factor authentication is not feasible without biometrics. From these perspective, the work in the provided an analysis how to generalification and join a positive impact the adoption of a new user experience, not necessarily need to be conjugate one another. These work also promoted pleasure as the best way for the fast technology adoption. For reference, the addresses and usability of ECG solution of authentication is concluded that the application of ECG is not that suitable for the dynamic real-life scenarios. So many researchers promoted that utilization of personal handheld devices to be utilized during the multi-factor authentication produced in our mobile or in their system wherever the security is needed. So what are the advantages here is no addition of tokens are necessary because it uses mobile devices that are usually carried out all the time. Because we have in our mobile phone, we have biometrics, and we have face recognition, we have passwords which we kept as secret, which is known to us exactly. The second one is as there are constantly changed dynamically generated passcodes are safer to use than fixed login information. So it is dynamically in the sense that it generates the password to in the sense to the particular users this password is being given, and to the another person this password is being given, so that it could be safer to the login information. So depending on the solution passwords that have been used or automatically replaced in order to ensure that a valid code is always available. Transmission, reception problem do not therefore prevent logins. The main advantage. And disadvantages are account recovery typically bypasses mobile phone for factor authentication. Suppose if I forgot my mobile phone password, I got forgot password, and it asks to me to reboot your phone that all your before access that could be gone, so that I could devise I have to create all my things in my phone as a new. So there is a disadvantage, and users may still be susceptible to phishing attacks. An attacker can send a text message that links to the spoofed website that looks identical to the actual website. The attacker can then get an authentication code, username, and password. The modern phones are used both for recovering emails and SMS nowadays. So if the phone is lost or stolen and it is not protected by a password or biometric, all the accounts for which the email is key can be hacked as the phone can receive the second factor. This is the main disadvantage. So I think no person nowadays is without a biometric or face recognition or password to their mobiles or laptops nowadays. Many of them having the passwords and biometric. So it may not happen. So the conclusion here is the authentication isn't critical for the safeguarding resources and against the illegal access. There are a variety of authentication techniques available, like bragging for a simple secret-based authentication to price and computation-intensive identifier systems. However, the most widely used authentication method still relies on the use of the text passwords. The text-based passwords do not appear to be safe enough for various applications that you you can access management technologies to ensure security. Text-based passwords with an authentication functionality has significant limitations. We tend to face leaving our authenticated system offering security on three levels. The first level password identification is followed by second level text password identification, which all nowadays has been have been using. So any multi-factor framework is a digital system composed by critical components such as sensor, data storage, processing devices, and communication channels. All of those are typically unheadable to various of attacks and at clearly different levels of making the replay attempts of advisory attacks. Security is thus a necessary tool to enable maintain the privacy. Therefore, we can begin the attacks executed on input device itself. So, thank you.